I have several different cones of yarn here. This is the yarn that we used in the warp, and that's what we're going to be using mostly to do the coasters. This I'm going to start with, it's basically some yarn that's waste yarn, because we're going to weave a little bit, get a little practice in before we actually start our first coaster, and also it gives a bit of a filler. I like to use yarn that's the same weight and a different color whenever I start a project. Now the other thing I'm going to do is that since these are coasters and we're going to also learn a little bit about hem stitching, I'm going to use a smaller yarn. Now the yarn like this comes in sizes. I think this one, they call it 8/8, so it's a larger yarn. Remember, the 8 has to do with a size that someone in textile came up with, and the second 8 has to do with how many threads are in it. So if I would pull it all apart, there'd be 8 threads. This yarn, and the higher the number, the heavier the yarn. This one is 5/2. It's a little bit lighter, about the same color. And then this one is 6/2. So I can use either one of these to get started to do the hem stitch. It's just nice to use a smaller yarn for the each end of your coasters. You can use this yarn as well. The other thing we have, there are usually 2 shuttles that come along with your loom. These are the 2. Now you notice this one's a little different. Well, I like to have a little notch in mine. So what I do is I ask my spouse, can you put little notches in there? If you have just a small saw or maybe even an X-Acto knife, I'm not sure if that would work. It's nice to do that because it's just nice to have a place to start your yarn when you're winding it on. You don't have to have it, but I just happen to like to lock that in place. Let's now take a look at how and why we wind our shuttles this way. The cone is on the floor and this shuttle does not have a notch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap it around maybe 2 times to get it started. And now I'm going to turn it on its edge and we're going to do the figure 8. So we go around, kind of like the infinity sign. Now, why do we do it this way rather than continue to build up here? It's because you build it up and it gets thicker here. It's on the edge. So when you're putting it in the shed of your project, you'll be able to slide it through easier because you don't have a lot of yarn sticking around it on both sides. And you can get a little bit more yarn on. But of course, you don't want to put too much on. I'm going to continue putting a little bit more yarn on that next. And now it's time to start weaving. Like I said, I do not have a non-skid mat underneath my loom or a rug, so it does slide a little bit. So instead, I'm going to rest my feet on the stand here. If you don't have a stand, again, you're on a table. I'm going to also show you a couple other methods. You can also lean it onto the table, and you can lean at the edge and against your waist. There's a couple different ways of holding your loom, and I'll demonstrate that in another part of a video, or maybe a whole other video. All right, we are now ready. Right now it's in the rest position. Now you can decide for yourself. Do you want to take your reed down and start that way and going whichever direction, left to right, right to left? That's up to you. There's no right way to do that. I happen to go down, and I am going to take the shuttle and go from right to left. But what I like to do is in this part here, when you start, I like to tuck one of those threads under just that end thread, pull it a little bit. So what I'll be doing now is I'm going to be bringing it as far as I can. And it's still a little bit loose right now. So I'm going to tighten it up a little bit. And we can pull that through. So again, right now it's still not quite where we want it. We're going to do another one using the waist. Now notice too, it's going to be at an angle. This time I can put it on the table beside me. Those are all things you can figure out as you're weaving, what works best for you. So now we're going to press it and go down into the bottom position, and we will go back. And remember, this is the beginning part. This is the waist. So try not to worry too much about your selvages and all those other things. We're getting some filler in right now. That's what we're working on. I'll just filling in a little bit. And if you need to here at the very beginning, you might need to tighten it and bring it forward and then back down. So what I'm working on is I'm working until I get that pretty much closed in there. Now these are getting a little bit closer. Bringing it through. Again, still maintaining that angle. And now you can also tighten it up a little bit more if you need to. Now this is where if you forget what you're doing and you go to push it down and you notice it's going to come right out, you go back the other way. It does happen, and we're getting to the point where it's almost, yes, it's almost closed. Keep going. So when people talk about waste on your loom, sounds like a horrible thing. It means what's not going to be part of your project. And I also notice sometimes at the very beginning, the edges might curl a little bit. Again, I don't like to touch the selvages, but at the very beginning, it might be good just to do that to get started. And I think we'll do one more the other direction. Across. And to me, it looks like we are to about, I'm going to put it in the rest position. These are basically together. You see how far apart it was down here, and now it's closer. Now we're ready to start weaving, and even the curl part has started to go away. I'm going to cut this off. I'm going to prepare another shuttle, and we'll keep going from there.